The rain came down in sheets that Thursday evening, turning the streets of Millbrook into rivers of reflected neon and headlight glare. Inside Me's diner, the warmth was almost oppressive, thick with the smell of frying onions, burnt coffee, and the kind of hope that came in ceramic mugs refilled too many times to count. The bell above the door chimed its tired greeting as another gust of wind pushed through, carrying with it the scent of wet asphalt and the promise of a long shift ahead. Sarah Mitchell wiped down the counter for the third time in 10 minutes, her movements automatic, efficient, born from 5 years of muscle memory and necessity. Her apron, once white, now carried the battle scars of 1,000 shifts, coffee stains that wouldn't come out, grease marks that told stories she'd rather forget, and a name tag that hung slightly crooked no matter how many times she straightened it. At 32, she looked older in the harsh fluorescent lighting, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix, the kind of worry that lived in the fine lines around her eyes and the set of her jaw. Behind her, through the kitchen window, she could see Miguel working the grill, his movements as practiced as her own. The sizzle and pop of bacon, the clatter of plates, the constant hum of the exhaust fan, these were the sounds of her life now, the soundtrack to survival. Her phone sat in her apron pocket, a weight that felt heavier than its actual mass, loaded with notifications she couldn't bear to check. Overdue notices, school reminders, text messages from her landlord that she'd been avoiding for 3 days. The dinner rush had been brutal. Families celebrating nothing in particular, couples on first dates trying too hard, truckers stopping through on routes that took them anywhere but home. She'd served them all with the same practiced smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes but seemed to satisfy most people enough to leave a decent tip. Tips that went straight into the envelope hidden in her locker, carefully counted and recounted, never quite enough but always desperately needed. Her daughter Emma was 7 now, gap-toothed and full of questions Sarah didn't always have answers for. Why can't I have new shoes like Madison? Why do we eat pasta so many nights? Why doesn't Daddy visit anymore? Each question was a small knife, precise and unintentional, cutting into the careful lies Sarah told herself about being enough, doing enough, surviving enough. Emma was staying with Mrs. Chen next door tonight, probably already asleep on the worn couch, clutching the stuffed rabbit that had seen better days, dreaming dreams that Sarah worked double shifts to protect. The diner was finally starting to empty out. It was nearly 9, and the late crowd hadn't arrived yet. The insomniacs and third shifters, the lonely and the lost, the people who found comfort in fluorescent lights and bottomless coffee when the rest of the world had gone dark. Sarah counted the remaining tables with the quick assessment of someone who knew exactly how much work stood between her and clocking out. Table 6 was lingering over dessert. Table 12 was asking for the check. The couple in booth 4 was so wrapped up in each other they'd probably sit there until closing, and she'd have to gently remind them that even young love had to yield to mop buckets and chair stacking eventually. That's when the bell chimed again, a sound that made her shoulders tense involuntarily. Late arrivals were always a gamble. Sometimes they were generous, grateful for a place still serving hot food when everywhere else had gone dark. Other times they were impatient, irritated at having to eat so late, as if their poor planning was somehow her fault, as if she controlled the hours in their day. The man who walked through the door didn't fit any of her usual categories. He was tall, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair that somehow looked intentional rather than aged, and a coat that probably cost more than she made in 3 months. Everything about him spoke of wealth, from the watch that caught the light when he moved his wrist to the way he carried himself, as if he'd never questioned his right to take up space in any room he entered. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. Rich customers were always unpredictable. Some were kind, almost apologetically so, as if aware of the gap between their world and hers. Others were demanding, treating service workers like furniture that happened to move and speak, their tips reflecting either their generosity or their judgment about whether you'd performed your role adequately enough. And some, the worst kind, were simply indifferent, leaving crumpled bills without looking at you, as if acknowledging your humanity would somehow diminish their own. He chose the corner booth, the one with the slightly torn vinyl that she kept meaning to report, but never did because it was also the quietest spot in the diner, the place where people went when they wanted to be alone with their thoughts. She grabbed a menu and a glass of water, putting on her service smile, the one she'd perfected in the mirror during those first awful months after David left, when she realized that her ability to make strangers comfortable was now worth actual money, that her smile had become a commodity she sold by the hour. "Good evening," she said, her voice carrying the practiced warmth that came from years of pretending. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" He looked up from his phone, and for just a moment something flickered across his face, an expression she couldn't quite read. Not contempt, not kindness, something else entirely. "Just coffee," he said. "Black." His voice was deep, measured, the kind of voice that was used to being listened to. Sarah nodded and turned away, grateful for the excuse to move. The coffee was fresh enough, barely 20 minutes old, though Miguel would probably argue it had already passed its prime. She poured it into one of the heavy ceramic mugs, the kind that had been in diners since diners were invented, and brought it back to the corner booth. He'd taken off his coat, revealing a suit that was somehow both casual and expensive, the kind of thing that looked effortless but probably required a team of people to maintain. He was looking out the window at the rain, his expression distant, as if he were solving complex problems in his head or perhaps trying to forget them. "Do you need a few minutes with the menu, or do you know what you'd like?" Sarah asked. He barely glanced at it. Burger, medium rare, fries, and he slid the menu back across the table, his attention already returning to the window. She took the order to Miguel, who raised an eyebrow at the simplicity of it. "Rich guy?" he asked, and she nodded. Miguel had a sixth sense for customers, could read them from their orders alone. The ones who ordered complicated modifications were usually difficult. The ones who ordered simple food were either genuinely easy or secretly the most demanding of all, expecting perfection in simplicity. The diner continued its slow evening wind down around them. Table 6 left a decent tip, 15%, nothing to celebrate but nothing to complain about. Table 12 stiffed her completely, leaving exact change and not a penny more, and she felt the familiar sting of it, the small insult that came with being told your service was worth nothing beyond what was already required. The couple in booth 4 finally noticed the time and left in a flurry of apologies and a $20 bill that almost made up for them taking up the table for 2 hours. When Miguel rang the bell, Sarah picked up the burger and fries, both cooked to the kind of perfection that came from decades of practice. She delivered the plate with the same practiced efficiency, asked if he needed anything else, got a shake of his head in response. He ate slowly, methodically, as if the food was fuel rather than pleasure, checking his phone occasionally but mostly just staring out at the rain-soaked street. Sarah busied herself with side work, rolling silverware in paper napkins, refilling salt shakers, wiping down already clean tables. The clock seemed to move slower when you wanted the night to end, each minute stretching into something longer than 60 seconds. Her feet ached in the non-slip shoes that had lost most of their support months ago. Her lower back throbbed with the dull persistence of someone who spent too many hours standing, carrying, bending, reaching. At some point, she noticed that the man in the corner booth had finished eating. His plate was empty, pushed slightly to the side, his coffee cup drained. But he hadn't signaled for the check, hadn't made any move to leave. He was just sitting there, still looking out the window, his hands folded on the table in front of him, waiting for something or maybe just waiting. The last of the other customers trickled out. The cook on the evening shift, Miguel, started his closing routine, the sounds of the kitchen being cleaned and shut down for the night. It was nearly 10 now, and Sarah wanted nothing more than to go home, to peel off these shoes, to check on Emma, to fall into bed and not think about bills or tips or the endless treadmill of trying to stay afloat. Finally, the man raised his hand slightly, the universal signal for a check. Sarah tore off his ticket from her pad, calculated the total, $18.50 for a burger, fries, and coffee, and brought it over to him. "No rush," she said automatically, though they both knew that was a lie. The diner closed at 11, and she still had to do her closing duties, still had to count her tips and hope they were enough to make the shift worth the time away from Emma. He glanced at the check, pulled out his wallet with the slow deliberation of someone who had never worried about checking his account balance before spending. He placed a $50 bill on top of the check, then stood up without a word, shrugging back into his expensive coat. Sarah picked up the bill, ready to ask if he wanted change, but he was already walking toward the door. She watched him go, the bell chiming his exit, and looked down at the money in her hand. $50 on an $18 check. That was a decent tip, better than decent, more than $30, nearly double the cost of the meal. But when she went back to clear his table, her heart sank. There on the table next to where his plate had been was the $50 bill. He'd left it to pay for his meal, not as a tip. And there was nothing else. No additional bills tucked under the plate, no coins left scattered on the table. Just the 50 to cover the $18 check, which meant she'd need to make change from the register. And her tip, her actual tip, was exactly zero. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, a small fracture in the careful armor she'd built over years of disappointments. She'd served him politely, efficiently, had made sure his coffee was hot and his burger was cooked right. She'd smiled and been pleasant, had done everything right. And somehow, it wasn't enough. She wasn't enough. She stood there for a moment, the empty plate in her hands, feeling the weight of it like an accusation. Around her, the diner felt larger, emptier, the fluorescent lights suddenly too bright, too harsh. Miguel was singing something in Spanish in the kitchen, oblivious to her small devastation. The rain continued its assault on the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. It wasn't about the money, except it was entirely about the money. $30 would have been groceries for 3 days. It would have been part of the power bill. It would have been the permission to say yes when Emma asked for something small, something other children had without thinking. $30 was the difference between making it through the month and having to choose which bill to pay late. But more than that, it was the casual dismissal of it, the way he'd left without even acknowledging her as a person worthy of consideration. She'd been invisible to him, or worse, visible but not worth the small gesture that would have cost him nothing but meant everything to her. Sarah blinked hard, refusing to let the tears come. She didn't have time for tears, didn't have the luxury of self-pity. She picked up the plate and carried it to the kitchen, scraped it clean, ran it through the sanitizer. She went to the register and made change from the 50, put the $31.50 in the cash drawer, and moved on to the next task. Except she couldn't quite move on. She went back to the corner booth to give it a final wipe down, to clear away the coffee cup and the wadded napkin. That's when she saw it, a small piece of paper tucked partially under the sugar caddy, hidden in plain sight, easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. Her first thought was that it was a receipt he'd left behind, something she'd need to throw away. But when she picked it up, she realized it wasn't a receipt at all. It was a handwritten note, the writing neat and precise, on heavy cardstock that felt expensive under her fingers. She unfolded it and read, "Dear Sarah, I noticed your name tag when you took my order. I also noticed the way you smiled at everyone tonight even though you looked exhausted. I saw you slip that elderly couple an extra piece of pie and refused to charge them for it. I watched you clean up after that family with 3 kids who left a mess that wasn't your fault. You did all of this with grace, with kindness, without knowing anyone was watching. I've spent my entire life in business, building companies, making deals, accumulating wealth that I'm not sure I deserve. Tonight, I wasn't testing you, but I was watching. Because I'm looking for someone. My mother owned a small restaurant when I was growing up. She worked herself to exhaustion, treated every customer like family, and taught me that true character shows up in how we treat people when we think no one important is watching. She passed away 3 years ago, and I inherited everything she built, everything I built on top of what she taught me. But I never found the right way to honor her memory until tonight. I own a chain of restaurants across 6 states. We do well, very well. But I've been looking for the right person to manage my newest location, right here in Millbrook. Not someone with an MBA or fancy credentials, but someone with character, with heart, with the kind of integrity that can't be taught in any school. I think that person might be you. The salary is $85,000 a year, full benefits, a signing bonus of $20,000, and a schedule that will let you be home for dinner with your daughter. Yes, I asked me about you. I wanted to make sure I wasn't wrong about what I saw. If you're interested, call the number below. If you're not, I understand. Either way, there's something else under this note. You've earned it 1,000 times over, not just tonight, but every night you've shown up and done your best when life has given you every reason not to. The 50 on the table was for the meal. What's underneath this note is your real tip. You're exactly the kind of person my mother would have loved. I hope you'll give me a chance to tell you more. Sarah's hands were shaking as she lifted the note higher. Underneath it, folded neatly, were $2,100 bills. $2,000 just sitting there, hidden under a note that was offering her something that felt impossible. A way out, a new start, a life that didn't involve counting pennies and choosing between pride and survival. She read the note again, then a third time, her mind struggling to process what was happening. This didn't happen in real life. People didn't walk into diners and offer struggling waitresses executive positions and life-changing amounts of money. This was the kind of story you saw in movies, the kind of thing that happened to other people in other places. But the money was real. She could feel it under her fingers, crisp and new. The note was real, complete with a phone number written at the bottom in the same neat handwriting. And somewhere out there in the rainy night, a man in an expensive coat had walked away without seeing her face when she discovered what he'd left behind. Me came out from the back office, her reading glasses perched on her nose, a calculator in one hand. "You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah held up the note, unable to speak, her throat tight with emotions she didn't know how to name. Me took it, read it slowly, her expression changing from confusion to shock to something that might have been joy. "Oh my God," me breathed. "Oh my God, Sarah, do you know who that was?" Sarah shook her head. "That was Robert Chen. He owns Horizon Dining Group. They've got restaurants in every major city in the region. High-end places, the kind where people make reservations weeks in advance. And he just offered you a job managing the new location." Sarah found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Is this real? This can't be real." Me looked at the money, then back at Sarah. "Honey, that's $2,000 in your hand. That's real enough. And Robert Chen doesn't joke about business. If he offered you this, he meant it." The diner suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. Sarah sat down in the booth, the same booth where he'd sat, where he'd watched her without her knowing, where he'd made decisions about her life based on observations she hadn't been aware of giving. It should have felt invasive, this stranger judging her, evaluating her. But instead, it felt like being seen, truly seen, maybe for the first time in years. "What do I do?" she whispered. Me sat down across from her, reached across the table and took her hand. "You call that number. You take the interview. You don't let fear talk you out of something that could change your life." "But I don't know anything about managing restaurants. I'm just a waitress." Me's grip tightened. "You're not just anything. You're one of the hardest workers I've ever had. You're smart, you're organized, you're good with people. You care about getting things right. Those fancy business school kids, they've got degrees, but half of them don't have common sense. You've got what matters. You understand service, you understand people, and you've got integrity coming out of your ears. Don't sell yourself short." Sarah looked down at the money in her other hand, trying to imagine what $2,000 could do. It was rent for 3 months. It was the car repair she'd been putting off. It was Emma's birthday party, a real one, with cake and presents and invitations to actual friends instead of a quiet celebration with the two of them pretending it was enough. It was breathing room, space to think, time to not be drowning. But the job, if it was real, if he was serious, that was something else entirely. That was a salary that would let her stop living month to month, check to check, crisis to crisis. That was benefits, which meant Emma could go to the doctor without Sarah having to decide if it was emergency room necessary. That was stability, the kind she hadn't known since before David left, before the divorce ate up their savings, before she found herself alone with a 3-year-old and a high school diploma in a town with limited options. "I'm scared," Sarah admitted. Me smiled, and there was something fierce in it, something protective. "Good. If you weren't scared, I'd worry about your judgment. This is big. It's supposed to be scary. But you know what's also scary? Working yourself into the ground for another 5 years, watching Emma grow up wondering why mommy's always tired, always stressed, always one emergency away from catastrophe. You've been surviving, honey. Maybe it's time to try living." The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Sarah finished her closing duties. She counted her other tips for the night, $83, decent for a Thursday, enough to feel okay about but not enough to feel good. She added it to the envelope in her locker, then carefully folded the $2,000 and put it in a separate pocket, zipped and secured. The note she kept in her hand, reading it once more in the harsh light of the employee break room. Miguel poked his head in. "You good? You've been quiet." She showed him the note, watched his eyes widen as he read. "No way, no freaking way." Me told him the rest, who the man was, what he'd offered. Miguel let out a long whistle. "Sarah, you have to do this. This is like winning the lottery, except better because it's a job, it's real, it's something you actually earn." "But what if I'm not good enough? What if he's wrong about me?" Miguel leaned against the doorframe, his expression serious. "I've worked with a lot of people in a lot of kitchens. You know what makes a good manager? It's not some fancy degree. It's giving a damn, it's showing up. It's treating people like they matter. You do all that already. The rest you can learn." Sarah drove home through streets that looked different somehow, as if the rain had washed away more than just dirt. The $2,000 felt like a secret tucked against her ribs, too big to be real, too important to trust completely. She kept touching her pocket, making sure it was still there, that she hadn't imagined the whole thing. Mrs. Chen was watching late-night television when Sarah knocked softly. Emma was asleep on the couch, her mouth slightly open, the stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Mrs. Chen smiled and waved away Sarah's offer of payment. "Next time," she said, like always, like every time, adding to a debt Sarah had no way to repay except with similar kindnesses when the opportunity arose. Sarah carried Emma up the stairs to their small apartment, grateful her daughter was light enough to manage even after a full shift. She tucked her into bed without waking her, kissed her forehead, and stood there for a long moment just watching her sleep. In the dim glow of the nightlight, Emma looked impossibly young, impossibly vulnerable, and Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders like a physical thing. Everything she did, every choice she made, it was all for this sleeping child who trusted her completely, who believed that mommy could fix anything, who didn't yet understand how close they were skating to the edge sometimes. Emma deserved better than this constant state of almost enough. She deserved a mother who didn't have to choose between buying school supplies and buying groceries. She deserved stability, security, a future that didn't hinge on tip percentages and the kindness of strangers. Sarah took out the note and read it again in the kitchen, under the buzzing fluorescent light that she kept meaning to replace. The words didn't change. The offer didn't disappear. Robert Chen's phone number sat at the bottom like a dare, like a challenge, like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning who wasn't sure they still knew how to swim. She thought about his mother, the woman who'd owned a small restaurant, who'd worked herself to exhaustion, who'd taught her son to notice people like Sarah, the ones who showed up and did their best when no one was watching. She wondered what that woman had been like, whether she'd also counted pennies and made impossible choices, whether she'd also lain awake at night wondering if she was doing enough, being enough. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Sarah lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, playing out scenarios in her head. What if she called and it was all a mistake? What if he'd changed his mind? What if she took the interview and failed spectacularly, proved to herself and everyone else that she was exactly what she feared? Just a waitress, nothing special, someone who'd peaked at pouring coffee and clearing tables. But then another voice, smaller but growing stronger, asked different questions. What if it was real? What if she could do this? What if she was exactly what he saw in her? Someone with character, with heart, with the kind of integrity that mattered more than credentials. What if this was her chance, her one shot at building something better, and she let fear talk her out of even trying? Morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. Emma bounced into her room at 7, full of 7-year-old energy, chattering about school and a project she had due and could they maybe get pizza this weekend. Sarah made breakfast, cereal and toast, nothing special but enough, and watched her daughter eat, seeing her differently somehow, seeing the future differently. After she dropped Emma at school, Sarah sat in her car in the parking lot, the note in her hand, her phone in the other. The rain had passed, leaving behind one of those crystalline autumn mornings where everything looked scrubbed clean, full of possibility. She stared at the number for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keypad. What did she have to lose? Her job at Me's wasn't going anywhere. Me had already told her that even if this worked out, even if she took the position, she'd always have a place at the diner if she needed it. Her dignity. She'd already left that behind a long time ago in the grinding necessity of survival work, in the thousand small humiliations of serving people who sometimes looked through her like she was invisible. She dialed before she could change her mind. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Horizon Dining Group, this is Rebecca, how may I help you? Sarah's mouth went dry. Hi, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I was told to call this number by Robert Chen. There was a pause, then the voice warmed considerably. Oh, yes, Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Chen said you might call. He's been hopping to hear from you. Can you hold for just a moment? The hold music was classical, something Sarah didn't recognize, but that sounded expensive somehow. Her heart was hammering in her chest, her palms sweating. This was really happening. She was really doing this. Sarah, Robert Chen's voice came on the line, warm and pleased. I'm so glad you called. I got your note, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. And the tip, thank you doesn't seem like enough. He laughed, a genuine sound. You don't need to thank me for paying you what you earned. I meant every word of that note, Sarah. You're exactly the kind of person I need running this location. Would you be willing to meet with me? Maybe see the space, talk about what the job would actually entail. I don't have much restaurant management experience, she admitted. I've been waitressing for 5 years, but I've never run a place. That's exactly why I want you. I can teach you the business side. What I can't teach is integrity, work ethic, the ability to make people feel valued. You've got all of that already. The rest is just details. They set up a meeting for the following day at the new restaurant location. Sarah hung up feeling dizzy, unreal, as if she'd stepped sideways into someone else's life. She drove to Me's for her shift in a daze, the morning light making everything look sharp and new. Me took one look at her face and broke into a grin. You called him. Sarah nodded. I'm meeting with him tomorrow. He wants to show me the restaurant. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of normal tasks that suddenly felt different, weighted with the knowledge that they might not be her normal for much longer. Every table she served, every order she took, every smile she gave, it all felt like practice for something else, like she was already becoming someone new. The next day, Sarah stood in front of her closet, staring at clothes that were suddenly inadequate for a business meeting. She didn't own a suit. She had 2 decent dresses, both worn to church and job interviews years ago, both slightly outdated but clean. She chose the navy one, paired it with her only nice shoes, spent extra time on her hair and makeup, trying to look professional, trying to look like someone who could manage an upscale restaurant. Emma watched her getting ready with wide eyes. "Mommy, you look pretty. Where are you going?" Sarah knelt down to her daughter's level. "Mommy has a very important meeting today. Remember how I told you that sometimes good things happen when we work hard and treat people kindly?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Well, something good might be happening for us. I'll tell you more about it later, okay?" The address Robert Chen had given her was on the nice side of town, where the streets were wider and the buildings newer, where everything looked polished and intentional. The restaurant was in a converted historic building, all exposed brick and large windows, with a discreet sign that read Ember and Oak in elegant lettering. Even from outside, Sarah could tell this was several steps above Me's diner, several steps above anywhere she'd ever worked. Robert Chen was waiting inside, dressed casually but expensively, his smile genuine when he saw her. "Sarah, thank you for coming. Welcome to what I hope will be your restaurant." The interior took her breath away. It was beautiful in a way that felt both rustic and refined. Long wooden tables that looked handcrafted, pendant lights that cast warm pools of light, an open kitchen where diners would be able to watch their meals being prepared. It was empty now, still being finished, but she could imagine it full of people, full of life, full of the kind of energy that came from good food and good company. He gave her a tour, pointing out features, explaining his vision. "This isn't going to be pretentious fine dining," he said. "I want it to feel approachable, welcoming. Great food, but the kind that makes you feel at home, not intimidated. I want families to feel comfortable bringing kids. I want couples to have romantic dinners. I want solo diners to feel welcome at the bar. That balance, that's what I need you to create." As he talked, Sarah found herself nodding, understanding instinctively what he meant. She'd served all those types of customers at Me's. She knew what made people comfortable, what made them want to come back. She understood the alchemy of good service, the way attention and genuine care could transform a meal from fuel into an experience. They sat at one of the tables and he laid out the details. The salary was indeed $85,000, with a comprehensive benefits package that included health insurance, dental, vision, and a retirement plan with company matching. The signing bonus was $20,000, available immediately upon accepting the position. The schedule would be demanding, restaurants always were, but he'd make sure she had consistent days off, reasonable hours, and enough staff that she wouldn't be expected to do everything herself. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said, "and I know you're probably wondering why I'm offering this to you based on one night of observation." Sarah nodded. It did seem kind of crazy. He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "When my mother died, I inherited her restaurant. It wasn't fancy. It was a neighborhood place, the kind where everyone knew each other's names. I wanted to keep it running as a tribute to her, but I was so busy with the business side of things that I hired a manager with all the right credentials. MBA, years of experience, impressive resume." He paused, looking around the empty restaurant. Within 6 months, the place had lost its soul. The food was fine, the service was efficient, but something was missing. The regulars stopped coming. The staff was unhappy. Reviews went from glowing to merely adequate. I finally realized that my fancy manager knew all about profit margins and inventory management, but didn't understand what my mother knew instinctively, that restaurants are about people first, food second, everything else third. So I started over. I hired someone without credentials but with heart, a line cook who'd worked for my mother for years, who understood what made that place special. It took a year, but he brought it back. The soul came back. And I learned that all the business school education in the world can't teach you how to make people feel valued, how to create the kind of environment where staff wants to show up and customers want to return. He looked directly at Sarah. "I've opened 14 restaurants now. Some have succeeded beyond my expectations. A few have failed spectacularly, and I've learned to trust my gut about people. When I watched you that night, I saw my mother. The way you treated everyone with the same respect, whether they tipped well or not. The way you went out of your way to make people comfortable. The extra piece of pie for the elderly couple. The way you cleaned up after those kids without a hint of resentment in your face. That's not something you can fake. Not for an entire shift when you think no one's watching. But what if you're wrong about me? Sarah asked quietly. What if I fail? Then you fail, and we figure it out together. I'd rather take a chance on someone with character and teach them the business than hire someone who knows the business but lacks heart. Besides, he added with a smile, I don't think I'm wrong. They talked for another hour, covering details, expectations, concerns. Sarah was honest about her lack of experience, her fears, her responsibilities as a single mother. Robert was equally honest about the challenges she'd face, the learning curve, the reality that some days would be overwhelming. But through it all, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years: excitement. Not just relief at the financial stability, but genuine excitement about the work itself, about the possibility of building something, of being part of something larger than just surviving shift to shift. When she finally left, she had a contract to review, a start date 3 weeks away to give me time to find her replacement, and a sense of unreality that followed her all the way home. She picked up Emma from school and they went to the park, Sarah pushing her on the swings, watching her daughter laugh and fly, thinking about all the ways their life was about to change. That night after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table and read through the contract carefully. It was real, all of it was real. The salary, the benefits, the signing bonus that would arrive in her account within days of signing. She thought about what it would mean. No more choosing between bills, no more panic when Emma needed new shoes or the car made a strange noise. Breathing room, safety, the ability to actually plan for the future instead of just reacting to the present. But more than that, she thought about the note, about Robert Chen's mother, about the idea that she'd been seen, truly seen, not for what she lacked but for what she possessed. Someone had looked at her life, her work, her choices, and had deemed her worthy not of pity but of opportunity. Someone had recognized that the skills she'd built through necessity, empathy, efficiency, resilience, the ability to make people feel cared for even when she was exhausted, those were valuable, transferable, worth investing in. She signed the contract at midnight, her signature slightly shaky but determined. Then she sat back and let herself cry, not from sadness but from relief, from hope, from the overwhelming feeling of a door opening when she'd convinced herself she was stuck in a room with no exits. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange blur of endings and beginnings. Sarah continued working at Mies, but everything felt different now, colored by the knowledge that this was temporary, that she was in transition, that her life was already changing even though the external circumstances looked the same. She gave her notice to me, who hugged her fiercely, and told her she'd always known Sarah was destined for bigger things. The other staff threw her a small party on her last shift, nothing fancy, just cake from the grocery store and heartfelt cards, but it meant more to her than they probably realized. Miguel pulled her aside during that last shift, his expression serious. You're going to be great at this, but don't forget where you came from, okay? Don't forget what it feels like to be on this side of things. I won't, Sarah promised. How could I? The signing bonus hit her account exactly when Robert said it would. $20,000 just appearing on her phone screen like magic, like a mistake, except it wasn't a mistake. It was real money, more than she'd ever had at once in her entire life. She paid 3 months of rent in advance, just to feel the security of it. She got her car properly serviced for the first time in 2 years. She took Emma shopping for new school clothes, not from the clearance rack, just regular shopping, letting her daughter pick things she actually liked instead of things they could afford. The look on Emma's face when Sarah said yes to a slightly more expensive jacket because Emma loved the color, that alone was worth everything. Her daughter's joy at such a small thing was both heartbreaking and motivating. This was what she was doing it for. This was what it meant to not just survive, but to actually live with a little breathing room, a little dignity, a little choice. Sarah spent her evenings reading everything she could find about restaurant management. She borrowed books from the library, watched YouTube videos, studied profit and loss statements until the numbers started making sense. Robert had arranged for her to spend a few days at one of his established restaurants, shadowing the manager there, learning the systems, understanding the flow. The manager, a woman named Patricia who'd worked her way up from hostess to management over 15 years, took Sarah under her wing immediately. "Robert told me about you," Patricia said on that first day. "He said you're someone who gets the people side of things. That's the hardest part to teach. Everything else, inventory, scheduling, vendor relations, food cost percentages, that's all learnable. But if you can't read a room, if you can't handle staff drama, if you don't understand what makes customers feel welcome versus tolerated, you'll struggle no matter how well you understand the spreadsheets." Over those few days, Sarah absorbed everything like a sponge. She learned about ordering systems and waste management, about scheduling staff to cover busy periods without overstaffing during slow times, about handling difficult customers and mediating conflicts between kitchen and front of house. She learned about health inspections and liquor licenses, about creating specials that used ingredients before they spoiled, about the delicate balance between giving staff autonomy and maintaining standards. But what struck her most was watching Patricia interact with her team. The way she knew everyone's name, remembered details about their lives, noticed when someone was having an off day and checked in with them. The way she corrected mistakes without humiliation, praised good work specifically rather than generically, created an environment where people wanted to do well because they felt valued. It was everything Sarah had tried to do for customers, now applied to managing employees. "You're going to be better at this than you think," Patricia told her on the last day. "You already understand that people work harder when they feel respected, when they believe their manager has their back. A lot of new managers get that backwards. They think they need to be hard, need to rule through fear or strict policies. Those managers burn through staff and wonder why they can't keep anyone good." Sarah's start date arrived with the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for first days of school. She'd bought new work clothes, professional but approachable, the kind of thing that said manager without saying unapproachable. She dropped Emma at school with extra hugs and arrived at Ember and Oak an hour before she needed to, just to sit with the reality of it. The restaurant was nearly finished now. The tables were in place, the kitchen was fully equipped and gleaming, the bar was stocked with bottles that caught the morning light. Her office, she had an office, was small but functional with a desk and a computer and a door that closed. A nameplate on the desk read Sarah Mitchell, General Manager, and she touched it like it might disappear. Robert arrived shortly after, bringing coffee and pastries and an energy that was both calming and energizing. "Ready for this?" Terrified, Sarah admitted, but ready. The first week was overwhelming in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. The restaurant wasn't open yet. That would come in 2 weeks. But there was an enormous amount of work to do. She had to hire an entire staff, from sous chefs to dishwashers, from experienced servers to entry-level hosts. She had to learn Robert's systems for everything from taking reservations to handling food allergies. She had to approve menus and wine lists, understand the point-of-sale system, memorize vendor contacts and emergency protocols. Robert was there for most of it, guiding but not controlling, teaching but also trusting her judgment. When she questioned her own decisions, he'd ask her to explain her reasoning, and more often than not, her instincts were sound. When she made mistakes, and she made plenty, he treated them as learning opportunities rather than failures. The hearing process was the most daunting. She had to interview dozens of people, assess their skills and experience, try to gauge whether they'd fit the culture she was trying to create. She found herself drawing on her years at Mies, remembering which coworkers had been reliable and which had been problems, understanding that technical skills could be taught but attitude and work ethic were much harder to change. She hired a sous chef named Marcus who had classical training, but had been working in casual dining for years. raising kids as a single father. And she saw something of herself in his story. Talented but practical, ambitious, but grounded in real-life responsibilities. She hired servers with varying levels of experience, but she looked for the same thing in all of them. People who seemed to actually care about doing good work, who treated the interview with respect, who asked questions about the culture and the team rather than just the pay. One of her hires was a young woman named Jessica, barely 21, interviewing for a server position. Jessica was nervous, stumbling over her words, apologizing for her lack of fine dining experience. But when Sarah asked her why she wanted the job, Jessica's whole demeanor changed. "I've been working retail for 3 years," she said, "and I'm good at it, I really am. But I'm tired of being treated like I'm stupid just because I'm young and I work in a store. I want to work somewhere that actually invests in training people, where doing a good job matters. I want to learn. I want to be part of something that's about more than just getting through a shift." Sarah hired her on the spot. She saw herself in Jessica, young, hungry for opportunity, underestimated but capable of far more than anyone had given her credit for. As the staff came together, Sarah held a meeting before the restaurant opened. She stood in front of 17 people, kitchen staff, servers, bartenders, hosts, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a physical thing. These people were depending on her. Their livelihoods, their schedules, their work environment, it all came back to her decisions, her leadership. "I know most of you have worked in restaurants before," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "So you know how it usually goes. Managers who don't know your names, who don't care if you're struggling, who treat you like you're replaceable. Kitchens and front of house that don't communicate, that blame each other when things go wrong. A culture where everyone's just trying to get through the shift without getting yelled at." She paused, looking at each face. "That's not what we're building here. We're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes because this is my first time managing a restaurant. But we're going to make those mistakes as a team. I'm going to learn your names. I'm going to care about your lives outside of work. I'm going to treat you with respect, and I expect you to treat each other with respect. This isn't going to be easy. Opening a new restaurant is chaotic. There will be long days and difficult customers and moments when everything seems to be going wrong at once. But we're going to support each other through it. Kitchen and front of house, we're one team. Your success is my success. Your challenges are my challenges." She saw people exchanging glances, some skeptical, some cautiously hopeful. She knew she'd have to prove it, that words were easy but follow-through was what mattered. "And one more thing," she added. "I used to be a waitress. I worked at Me's Diner for 5 years, so I know what it's like to be exhausted and have someone treat you like you're invisible. I know what it's like to work your ass off and get stiffed on a tip. I know what it's like when managers make decisions without thinking about how they affect your life. I'm going to remember that, and if I ever forget, I want you to call me on it." The training period was intense. Mock services where they practiced everything from greeting customers to handling complaints, where Sarah could identify problems before real guests experienced them. Marcus ran the kitchen with an efficiency that impressed her, but she noticed tension between him and one of the line cooks, a younger guy named Tyler who had technical skills but a cocky attitude that was rubbing people wrong. Sarah pulled Tyler aside after a particularly tense practice service. "We need to talk." He shrugged, defensive. "What? I'm doing my job." "You're doing your job technically fine, but you're making Marcus's job harder and you're creating tension in the kitchen. Why?" Tyler's defenses stayed up for a moment, then crumbled slightly. "I went to culinary school. I trained at some of the best restaurants in the city. Marcus is good, but he's not classically trained. It's frustrating taking orders from someone who learned by doing rather than through proper education." Sarah felt a flash of anger but kept her voice level. "So you think formal education is the only legitimate way to learn?" "Well, yeah. I mean, no offense, but there's a reason classical training matters. Let me tell you something, Tyler. I didn't go to college. I didn't go to any kind of management school. 6 weeks ago, I was a waitress working doubles to keep the lights on for my daughter. Robert Chen hired me to run this place not because of my resume, but because he thought I had something that can't be taught in any school: integrity, work ethic, the ability to treat people with respect. She let that sink in for a moment. Marcus has been cooking professionally for 15 years. He's raised 3 kids while working in restaurant kitchens. He knows things you haven't learned yet, not because you're not talented, but because some things only come with time and real-world experience. You have a choice right now. You can keep thinking you're better than everyone else because of where you trained, or you can actually learn from the people around you and become a better chef. But if you can't check your ego, this isn't going to work out. Tyler looked stunned, then embarrassed. I didn't think about it that way. Start thinking about it that way. We're a team. Every single person here has value, has something to contribute. Your culinary school training is valuable. Marcus's years of experience are valuable. We need both. But we need everyone working together, not competing about whose knowledge is more legitimate. Over the next few days, Sarah noticed Tyler's attitude shift. He asked Marcus questions instead of questioning Marcus's decisions. He helped train the less experienced line cooks with more patience. And Marcus, in turn, acknowledged Tyler's technical skills, asked for his input on plating and technique. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. The night before opening, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed going over every detail in her mind, every possible disaster, every contingency plan. What if no one came? What if everyone came and they couldn't handle it? What if the food wasn't good enough? What if she'd made terrible hearing decisions? What if she failed spectacularly in front of everyone, proving that she was exactly what she'd feared, just a waitress playing at being something more? Emma stirred in the next room and Sarah went to check on her. Her daughter was sprawled across the bed in that boneless way children sleep, the stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. They'd moved to a better apartment now, a 2-bedroom place with actual heat and windows that closed properly. Emma had her own room for the first time in years, had decorated it with drawings and the few new things Sarah had let herself buy: a bookshelf, a reading lamp, a rug that was soft under bare feet. This was why. This sleeping child, this better apartment, this possibility of a life that wasn't defined by constant stress and scarcity. Even if the restaurant failed, even if Sarah got fired tomorrow, she'd already given her daughter something valuable: proof that things could change, that working hard and treating people well sometimes did pay off, that their circumstances didn't have to be permanent. Opening night arrived with perfect weather and an energy that felt electric. The staff arrived early, nervous but prepared, dressed in the uniforms they'd chosen together: black pants, crisp white shirts, aprons that matched the restaurant's aesthetic. Sarah wore the same thing, wanting to signal that she was part of the team, not separate from it. Robert came by an hour before opening, walking through the space with a critical eye, then turning to Sarah with a smile. "It looks perfect. You've done amazing work." "We'll see," Sarah said. "Ask me again after we survive tonight." The first guests arrived right at 5, and Sarah felt her stomach clench with nerves. But as she watched her staff in action, as she saw Jessica greet customers with genuine warmth, as she heard Marcus calling out orders in the kitchen with calm authority, as she noticed the bartender chatting easily with guests at the bar, she felt something shift. They were ready. She was ready. The night wasn't perfect. One table's food came out slower than it should have, and Sarah comped their desserts. A wine glass broke near the kitchen, and she helped clean it up while directing traffic around it. A customer had an allergy that wasn't properly communicated, and she caught it just in time, making sure the kitchen remade the dish correctly. But these were manageable problems, the kind of chaos that was normal in restaurants, that could be handled with calm communication and quick thinking. And the things that went right far outnumbered the problems. Customers praised the food, the atmosphere, the service. She heard laughter from multiple tables, saw couples holding hands across candlelit surfaces, watched families making memories. This was what it was supposed to feel like. Not just efficient service, but actual hospitality, people feeling welcomed and valued and cared for. At the end of the night, after the last guests had left and the staff was doing cleanup, Sarah gathered everyone for a brief meeting. "You were incredible tonight. Every single one of you. Yes, we had some hiccups, but that's normal. What matters is that we worked together, we communicated, we fixed problems as they came up. And most importantly, we made people happy. I heard so many compliments tonight about the food, about the service, about the space. That's because of your hard work." Jessica was beaming. Marcus looked satisfied in the quiet way of someone who'd proven something to himself. Tyler was talking animatedly with another line cook about a technique they'd used. The bartender was helping a server understand the wine list better. They looked like a team. Sarah stayed late after everyone left, walking through the empty restaurant, straightening chairs that didn't need straightening, checking details that had already been checked. She was exhausted, her feet hurt, her brain felt fried from making 1,000 small decisions. But she felt something she hadn't felt in years: pride. Real, uncomplicated pride in work well done, in a team well led, in a challenge met and overcome. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Heard tonight was a huge success. Well done, Sarah. I knew I wasn't wrong about you." She sat down in one of the booths, the same kind of booth where she'd served him that night at Me's, and let herself feel the full weight of how far she'd come. 6 weeks ago, she'd been clearing a table and finding a $0 tip, feeling invisible and defeated. Now she was the general manager of a beautiful restaurant, leading a team, building something that mattered. The note was still in her wallet, slightly worn from being carried everywhere. She took it out and read it again, even though she'd long since memorized every word. "You're exactly the kind of person my mother would have loved." She hoped that was true. She hoped that somewhere Robert's mother would have approved of this, a struggling waitress being given a chance, being seen for her character rather than her circumstances. The first few weeks were a learning curve steep enough to be almost vertical. Every day brought new challenges, new problems Sarah had never encountered, new decisions she wasn't entirely sure how to make. A vendor delivered the wrong order, and she had to decide whether to make it work or send it back and risk not having key ingredients. Two servers got into an argument about tip pooling, and she had to mediate, find a solution that felt fair. The health inspector came for the first official inspection and found minor violations that needed immediate correction. But she learned quickly, adapted constantly, relied on her team and on Robert's guidance when she needed it. Patricia called her every few days, checking in, offering advice, becoming something like a mentor. Me stopped by for dinner one evening and gave her a fierce hug, told her the place was beautiful and she'd always known Sarah would do great things. More importantly, the restaurant was succeeding, not just surviving but actually thriving. Reservations were booking up days in advance. Reviews started appearing online, glowing write-ups about the food, the atmosphere, the exceptional service. Local food bloggers came and left impressed. The staff was gelling into a real team, covering for each other, training new hires with the same philosophy Sarah had established. Emma adjusted to their new life with the resilience of childhood. She loved their new apartment, loved that Mommy seemed less stressed, loved that there was always enough food in the fridge and she could sometimes have friends over. Sarah's schedule was demanding but more predictable than Me's had been. She could actually plan ahead, could sometimes be home for dinner, could attend school events without having to beg for shift coverage. One evening, about 2 months after opening, Sarah was doing paperwork in her office when Jessica knocked on the door. "Hey, do you have a minute?" "Of course, what's up?" Jessica sat down, looking nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you for hearing me, for giving me a chance. I know I didn't have the experience some of the other applicants probably had." "You're doing great work, Jessica. You've more than proven yourself." "It's not just the job, though. It's the way you run things here. My last manager at the retail store, she was just awful. She'd schedule me for closing and then opening the next day even though she knew I was taking classes. She'd yell at us in front of customers if we made mistakes. She made it clear that we were completely replaceable and she didn't care about us at all. Jessica's voice got stronger. But you're different. You remember everyone's names and their schedules. You ask how my classes are going. When I messed up that order last week, you corrected me but you didn't humiliate me. You actually care about us as people. That matters so much more than you probably realize. Sarah felt her throat tighten. I remember what it's like to be on your side of things. I remember what it's like to have managers who don't see you as a person. I never want to be that kind of manager. You're not, Jessica said simply. And that's why everyone here is working so hard. We don't want to let you down. After Jessica left, Sarah sat with that for a long time. This was what success actually looked like. Not just profit margins and positive reviews, but creating an environment where people felt valued, where they wanted to come to work, where they gave their best because they felt like their best was appreciated. The holiday season brought new challenges and new opportunities. They created special menus for Thanksgiving and Christmas, hosted private parties and special events, navigated the chaos of the busiest restaurant season with a team that had grown confident and capable. Sarah worked long hours, but they were hours that felt meaningful, that were building towards something. On Christmas Eve, after they'd served the last holiday meal and the staff was cleaning up, Sarah pulled out envelopes she'd prepared. Bonuses for everyone, modest but meaningful, a thank you for their hard work and dedication. She watched faces light up as they opened them, saw the relief and gratitude, remembered what even a small, unexpected influx of money could mean when you were living close to the edge. Marcus pulled her aside as everyone was leaving. This is the best place I've ever worked. I mean that. I've been in restaurant kitchens for 15 years, and I've never had a manager who actually gave a damn about the people doing the work. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The restaurant's first anniversary approached with a surreal quality. A full year since Robert Chen had walked into Mi's diner and changed Sarah's life. A year since she'd found that note and $2,000 and an impossible offer. A year since she'd stood in this empty space and wondered if she could possibly be enough. They planned a celebration, a special tasting menu, live music, an event to thank the community that had supported them. Sarah invited everyone who'd been part of the journey, Mi and Miguel from the diner, Patricia from Robert's other restaurant, Mrs. Chen who'd watched Emma so many nights. She invited the vendors who'd taken chances on them, the early customers who'd come back again and again, the staff members who'd built this place into what it had become. Emma came to the party in a new dress, her hair in braids, so proud of her mom that Sarah could hardly stand it. She watched her daughter move through the restaurant with complete confidence, chatting with guests, showing off the space like it was hers too. In a way, it was. This stability, this success, it belonged to both of them. Robert arrived with a gift, a framed copy of the note he'd left under his plate that night, professionally mounted and preserved. "I thought you might want this," he said. "A reminder of where you started and how far you've come." Sarah looked at the familiar words, handwritten in neat script, promising her a chance she hadn't dared to hope for. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself, for taking a risk, for changing my life." He shook his head. "You changed your own life, Sarah. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it and built something amazing on the other side." During the party, Sarah stood at the edge of the dining room, watching everything unfold. The space was full of light and laughter, the sound of glasses clinking and conversations flowing, the smell of incredible food wafting from the kitchen. Her staff moved through it all with practiced grace. Jessica had been promoted to head server and was training new hires with the same patience Sarah had shown her. Tyler had become Marcus's right hand in the kitchen, his talent finally matched by genuine teamwork. The bartender was mixing cocktails with showmanship that delighted customers. This was hers, not in the sense of ownership, but in the sense of responsibility, of leadership, of having built something from nothing through work and care and determination. She'd taken a chance on herself, had trusted that maybe Robert Chen had seen something real in her, had proven that character and integrity and empathy were worth more than credentials or experience. Me found her in that moment, put an arm around her shoulders. Look at you, honey. Look at what you've built. Sarah leaned into the older woman who'd given her a job when she was desperate, who'd believed in her even when Sarah hadn't believed in herself. I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me a chance when I needed it most. And now you're giving other people chances. That's how it works. We lift each other up. We see potential in people when they can't see it in themselves. We remember what it's like to struggle, and we help others through their struggles. Later, after the party wound down and most of the guests had left, after Emma had fallen asleep on one of the banquettes and Sarah had carried her to the car, after the staff had cleaned up and said their good nights, Sarah found herself alone in the restaurant again, just like that first opening night. She walked through the space slowly, touching tables, adjusting already straight chairs, looking at the framed note Robert had given her, now hanging on the wall of her office. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the divorce that had shattered her plans, the years of struggling and surviving, the exhaustion and worry that had become her constant companions. The night a billionaire had walked in and left what looked like nothing but turned out to be everything. Sarah had learned something crucial in this year. That worth wasn't determined by circumstances or credentials or the judgments of people who looked past you. That character revealed itself in small moments, in how you treated people when you were exhausted, in the extra kindness you showed when no one was watching, in the dignity you maintained even when life was trying its best to strip it away. She'd been seen, truly seen, not pitied, not saved, but recognized for qualities she possessed, for a potential she carried, for a capability others had overlooked. Robert hadn't rescued her. He'd given her a chance to rescue herself, to prove what she already was, to build something that reflected her values and her vision. The note had said, "You're exactly the kind of person my mother would have loved." Sarah thought about that often, about the woman she'd never met who'd worked herself to exhaustion, who'd treated every customer like family, who'd taught her son to notice people like Sarah. She hoped she was honoring that woman's memory, hoped she was proving that the investment in character, in kindness, in seeing people's worth beyond their circumstances, that it mattered, that it paid forward, that it created ripples that extended far beyond a single act of generosity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mrs. Chen had helped her send it. "I'm proud of you, Mommy. Love you forever." Sarah saved the message, added it to the collection of small moments that sustained her, that reminded her why any of this mattered. She turned off the lights in the restaurant, set the alarm, walked out into the cool evening air. Her car was paid off now. Her apartment was warm and safe. Emma's shoes fit properly and her school supplies were new. There was money in savings for emergencies, and emergencies didn't feel catastrophic anymore because she had resources to handle them. But more than any of that, Sarah had learned that she was capable of more than she'd imagined. That being seen, truly seen, by someone who recognized potential rather than limitations, that could be transformative. That sometimes kindness looked like opportunity, like investment, like believing in someone enough to give them a chance to prove themselves. She drove home through familiar streets that felt different now, past Me's diner where her old life still existed for other people fighting their own battles, past the park where she'd pushed Emma on swings while trying not to think about overdue bills. The journey from there to here hadn't been magic. It had been work, relentless and demanding and often overwhelming. But it had been possible because someone had looked past her circumstances and seen her character, had offered not charity but opportunity, had trusted that she had something valuable to contribute. The next morning, Sarah woke early despite the late night. She made breakfast for Emma, helped her get ready for school, reminded her about the field trip that afternoon. Normal routine, normal moments, but suffused with a security that was still novel enough to feel precious. As she dropped Emma off, She watched her daughter run toward her friends without looking back, confident and happy, and Sarah felt the kind of gratitude that was almost painful in its intensity. At the restaurant, she went through her morning routine, checking inventory, reviewing reservations, preparing for the day's lunch service. Jessica arrived early, always did, that work ethic that Sarah had recognized in herself. They went over the schedule together, discussed a private party booking for next week, planned staff training for new menu items. But Sarah's mind kept returning to something Jessica had said weeks ago. You actually care about us as people. That matters so much more than you probably realize. It had mattered to Sarah too, back when she was the one working tables, when being acknowledged as a human being rather than just a service function had felt like a small miracle. She thought about all the people in service jobs right now, the waitresses and line cooks, the retail workers and housekeepers, the people who were doing essential work for wages that barely covered essentials. How many of them had potential that no one was seeing? How many of them were capable of so much more if someone just gave them a chance? Sarah made a decision. She called Robert that afternoon, pitched him an idea. What if we created a training program? Something formal, where we identify promising people in entry-level positions and teach them management skills, business fundamentals, leadership. Not just at our restaurant, but as a model that could scale. We could partner with other restaurants, create pathways for people to move up based on character and potential rather than just credentials. Robert was quiet for a moment then. I love it. Let's develop it. We could even offer scholarships for formal education for those who want it, but the core would be mentorship and practical training. Let me think about the structure, talk to some people. But yes, Sarah, absolutely yes. Over the next several months, they built the program together. Sarah drew on her own experience, on everything she'd learned from Patricia, on the challenges she'd faced and overcome. They called it the Horizon Leadership Initiative, and they recruited managers from across Robert's restaurant group to serve as mentors. They identified entry-level workers with potential, people like Jessica, like Marcus had been when he started, like Sarah herself, and gave them training, support, opportunity. The first cohort was 10 people, all from different backgrounds, all working in various positions across the restaurant group. Sarah taught several of the classes herself, on topics like team building and conflict resolution, on the difference between managing and leading, on how to create an environment where people wanted to show up and do their best work. One of the participants was a dishwasher named Carlos, mid-30s, who'd been in the industry for 12 years and had never been given a chance to move up despite being reliable, hardworking, and beloved by everyone who worked with him. During one of Sarah's classes, he raised his hand tentatively. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course." "Why did you choose me? I mean, I'm grateful, don't get me wrong, but I'm just a dishwasher. I didn't even graduate high school. There have to be people more qualified." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "Carlos, I chose you because your manager told me that when one of the prep cooks was struggling with English, you spent your breaks teaching him Spanish and helping him learn the kitchen terminology in both languages. Because when someone's falling behind, you jump in to help without being asked. Because you show up on time every single day and you treat everyone with respect, from the executive chef to the new hire who's still learning where everything is." She paused, making sure he was really hearing her. Those aren't small things. Those are exactly the qualities that make great leaders. Technical skills, business knowledge, we can teach you all of that. But integrity, generosity, the instinct to build people up rather than tear them down, that's who you already are. I'm not giving you charity. I'm investing in someone who's already shown me they have what matters most. Carlos's eyes were bright with emotion. No one's ever said anything like that to me before. "Then people haven't been paying attention," Sarah said simply. "I'm paying attention now." The program grew. Some participants thrived immediately, moving into supervisory roles and then management positions. Others took longer, needed more support, but all of them flourished under the attention and investment. Word spread in the industry. Horizon Dining Group was doing something different, was promoting from within based on character and potential, was proving that you didn't need an expensive education to succeed if you had the right qualities and the right support. Sarah was invited to speak at industry conferences, to share her story and the philosophy behind the program. She stood on stages in front of hundreds of restaurant professionals and told them about finding a note under a plate, about being seen when she felt invisible, about the difference between charity and opportunity. The most important thing Robert Chen did that night, she told one audience, wasn't giving me money or even offering me a job. It was recognizing that my circumstances didn't define my capabilities. He saw past the uniform and the tired smile and the apparent limitations of my situation, and he recognized qualities that were valuable, transferable, worth investing in. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. How many talented people are working in your restaurants right now, in positions that don't reflect their full potential? How many of them are a single opportunity away from being exactly what you need in leadership? The best managers I know aren't the ones with the most impressive resumes. They're the ones who understand service from the inside out, who have experienced what it's like to be on the other side of management decisions, who lead with empathy because they remember what it felt like to need empathy themselves. 2 years after that life-changing night at Me's Diner, Sarah was promoted to Director of Operations for Horizon Dining Group, overseeing multiple restaurants and the leadership program that had grown beyond what any of them initially imagined. Her salary had increased accordingly, and she'd moved Emma into a house. Nothing extravagant, but a real house with a yard and enough space for Emma to have friends over, for Sarah to host dinners for her staff, for both of them to feel rooted in a way they'd never experienced before. But Sarah never forgot where she came from. She still visited Me's Diner regularly, still slid into the same booth where Robert had sat, still ordered coffee and pie and left generous tips for servers who were fighting the same battles she'd fought. She started a quiet practice of leaving notes with her tips, nothing elaborate, just a few lines of encouragement, of recognition, of acknowledgement that she saw them, that their work mattered, that they were valued. One evening, a young server at Me's approached her nervously. "Are you Sarah Mitchell, the one who used to work here?" Sarah nodded. "That's me." The server held up one of Sarah's notes, carefully folded. "You left this for me last month. It said you noticed how I handled a difficult customer with grace, and that I should be proud of how professional I remained. I've kept it in my wallet ever since. It got me through some really hard shifts." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm a single mom just like you were. I'm barely making it work most days. But that note, just knowing someone saw me trying, someone thought I was doing okay, it mattered so much. I just wanted to say thank you." Sarah hugged her, felt the familiar shape of that particular struggle, that particular exhaustion. "What's your name?" "Jennifer." "Jennifer, are you happy doing this work, or is this just survival?" "Honestly, it's survival. I mean, I don't hate it, but I'd love to do more, be more. I just don't see how that's possible right now." Sarah pulled out a business card, wrote a number on the back. "This is my direct line. Call me next week. We're always looking for people in our leadership program, people who have character, who work hard, who treat others well even when they're struggling themselves. If you're interested in exploring restaurant management as a career, I'd like to talk to you about opportunities." Jennifer stared at the card like it might vanish. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. I was exactly where you are. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. Now I'm in a position to do the same for others. Call me. We'll talk." Sarah left that night thinking about the circle of it all. The way being lifted up created a responsibility to reach back and lift others. She'd been given an extraordinary gift, not just money or a job, but recognition, belief, investment in her potential. The most meaningful way to honor that gift was to pass it forward, to look for the Jennifers and Carloses of the world, the people grinding through invisible struggles with quiet dignity, waiting for someone to see them. Emma was 9 now, thriving in ways that still sometimes took Sarah's breath away. She was confident, curious, generous with her friends, secure in the knowledge that her mother was present and available in ways that hadn't been possible during those diner years. They had dinner together most nights, real dinners at a table rather than cereal eaten standing at the counter. They took weekend trips sometimes, nothing extravagant but adventures that built memories beyond survival. Emma was taking piano lessons, had joined a soccer team, was reading above her grade level and dreaming big dreams that Sarah no longer had to quietly worry about being able to support. One night, helping Emma with homework, Sarah's daughter asked a question that cut straight to the heart of everything. "Mom, you know how you always tell me that being kind is more important than being rich or famous or anything like that?" "Yes, baby, I believe that." Emma chewed her pencil thoughtfully. "Is that why you got your new job? Because you were kind?" Sarah considered how to answer, how to translate a complex story into something a 9-year-old could understand. "Someone very important noticed that I was kind even when I was tired and worried. He noticed that I tried to help people and do good work even when things were hard for us. And he decided that those qualities meant I could do more than just serve tables, that I could lead a team, run a restaurant, help other people succeed. So being kind gave us this house. Being kind opened a door. But then I had to walk through it and work really hard and learn a lot of new things. The kindness got someone's attention. The hard work is what let me keep the opportunity." Emma nodded slowly, processing. "I want to be like that. I want people to notice that I'm kind." Sarah pulled her daughter close. "You already are, sweetheart. I see it every day. The way you include kids who are sitting alone at lunch. The way you help your friends with their math even though it means you have less time for your own work. The way you thank me for dinner and help clean up without being asked. You're kind in all the ways that matter." That night after Emma was asleep, Sarah pulled out the framed note that now hung in her home office. She read it again, even though she'd long since memorized every word. "You're exactly the kind of person my mother would have loved." She wondered about Robert's mother often, about the sacrifices she'd made, the work she'd done, the values she'd instilled. That woman had died never knowing that her son would one day change Sarah's life because of lessons learned watching his mother work. The ripples extended in directions you could never predict. Jennifer called the following week, her voice nervous and hopeful. Sarah invited her to lunch, not at Ember and Oak but at a casual cafe, somewhere Jennifer wouldn't feel intimidated or out of place. Over sandwiches, Sarah asked questions, listened more than she talked, and recognized in Jennifer's answers the same qualities Robert must have seen in her: resilience, integrity, a work ethic born from necessity, a kindness that persisted despite hardship. "I can't promise this will be easy," Sarah told her. "The program is demanding. You'll be working full-time while taking classes and learning new skills. It's a lot to juggle, especially as a single parent. But if you're willing to put in the work, we'll support you every step of the way. We'll work with your schedule, help with childcare costs, give you mentorship and training. And at the end of it, you'll have real opportunities for advancement, for a career rather than just a job." Jennifer's eyes were bright. "When do I start?" 3 years after that transformative night, Ember and Oak was one of the most successful restaurants in the region, with a wait list that extended weeks and reviews that consistently praised not just the food but the exceptional service and warm atmosphere. Sarah had successfully opened 2 more locations, each one following the same model: hire for character, train for skills, create an environment where both staff and customers felt valued. The Horizon Leadership Initiative had expanded beyond Robert's restaurant group. Other companies were adopting similar programs, recognizing that untapped potential existed throughout their organizations in people who'd been overlooked because they lacked traditional credentials. Sarah had been featured in industry publications, had spoken at conferences, had even been approached about writing a book about her approach to leadership and talent development. But the work that mattered most to her remained the individual connections, the one-on-one moments where she could see potential in someone who couldn't yet see it in themselves. Jennifer had completed the program and was now managing one of the newer restaurant locations, thriving in ways that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago when she was barely surviving at Mies. Carlos had been promoted twice and was being groomed for an executive chef position. Jessica was working on her business degree while serving as Sarah's assistant director of operations, learning the broader business side while maintaining her connection to frontline service. Each success felt personal, felt like validation not just of Sarah's leadership, but of the philosophy underlying it all. That character mattered more than credentials, that potential existed in unexpected places, that investing in people based on who they were rather than what their resume said could transform both individual lives and organizational culture. Mee's diner closed unexpectedly that winter. Mee was retiring, had decided she was too old to keep running the place, and there wasn't anyone to take it over. Sarah heard about it through Miguel, who called her sounding lost. "I don't know what I'm going to do," he told her. "I've worked there for 20 years. It's the only job I've had in this country. I'm 53 years old and I don't know how to do anything else." "Can you come see me tomorrow?" Sarah asked. "I want to talk to you about something." The next day, in her office at Horizon Dining Group headquarters, Sarah made Miguel an offer. "I want to open a new restaurant. Something different from our other locations, more casual, more neighborhood-focused. Comfort food done really well, a place where everyone feels welcome regardless of how much money they have. And I want you to run the kitchen." Miguel stared at her. "Sarah, I'm not a chef, I'm a line cook. I don't have any training." "You've been cooking professionally for 20 years. You know food, you know kitchens, you know how to manage a busy service. Everything else we can teach you. But I can't teach someone to have your work ethic, your integrity, your ability to stay calm under pressure. Those are the things that actually matter." She leaned forward. "Miguel, you taught me so much when I was struggling at Mies. You covered for me when I was falling apart. You made me laugh when I wanted to cry. You believed I could handle things even when I wasn't sure I could. Let me return the favor. Let me give you the same kind of chance someone gave me." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll trust me the same way I'm trusting you." The new restaurant, which they named Haven, opened 6 months later in a renovated building in a working-class neighborhood. The kind of place where families needed affordable options and good food felt like a luxury most couldn't justify. They priced the menu carefully. Nothing was cheap, because they used quality ingredients and paid staff well, but nothing was prohibitively expensive either. A family of 4 could eat well for $50. A solo diner could get a satisfying meal for $12. Miguel's cooking was exactly what Sarah had envisioned: honest, flavorful, the kind of food that felt like home. He'd hired several other cooks from Mies, people who'd been displaced by the closure, and together they'd created a kitchen culture that was supportive rather than competitive, collaborative rather than cutthroat. The front-of-house staff included several graduates of the leadership program who were gaining management experience, as well as newer servers who were just starting their journeys. Sarah made sure everyone understood the mission. This wasn't just a restaurant, it was a community space, a place where people should feel welcomed and valued regardless of their circumstances. They had a quiet policy that Sarah had insisted on. If someone came in who clearly couldn't afford a full meal, staff were empowered to quietly comp items to ensure no one left hungry. It happened more often than Sarah had expected, and she didn't care. The cost was minimal compared to the impact, and she remembered too well what it felt like to count pennies, to wonder if you could afford to feed your child adequately. One evening, about a month after Haven opened, an older woman came in alone, looking uncertain. She studied the menu for a long time, and Sarah noticed her calculating, doing math in her head. Sarah approached her table personally. "Good evening, can I help you with anything?" The woman smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what I can afford. I heard this place was good, and it's been a long time since I've eaten out anywhere. But I need to be careful." Sarah sat down across from her. "What would you order if price wasn't a concern?" The woman looked startled. "Oh, I couldn't." "Humor me. What sounds good to you?" Hesitantly, the woman pointed to a roasted chicken dish with vegetables and mashed potatoes. "That looks wonderful, like something my mother used to make." Sarah signaled to a server. "One roasted chicken special, please, and bring some of that apple pie we made today for dessert." The woman protested. "I can't afford all that." "You're not paying for it. You're our guest tonight." Tears sprang to the woman's eyes. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand, you just need to enjoy your meal." Sarah stood up, then paused. "We've all needed help at some point. There's no shame in it. Tonight, let us help you." Later, as the woman was leaving, she stopped by Sarah's table. She'd clearly been crying. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I've been having such a hard time lately, and I've felt so invisible, so forgotten. You made me feel like I mattered." "You do matter," Sarah said simply, "and you're welcome here anytime." After the woman left, one of the newer servers approached Sarah. "That was really kind, but can we afford to give away meals like that?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Here's what I've learned. Restaurants succeed or fail based on culture, not just on profit margins. Yes, we need to be financially sustainable. But if we create a place where people feel valued, where staff wants to work and customers want to return, where we're part of the community rather than just taking from it, that creates loyalty, reputation, word of mouth that no amount of marketing can buy." She gestured to the dining room, which was nearly full despite being a weeknight. "Every person in here has a story. Some of them are comfortable, some are struggling, most are somewhere in between. If we treat everyone with dignity, if we create an environment where people feel welcomed and cared for, they'll come back. They'll tell their friends. We'll build something sustainable because we built it on the right foundation." The server nodded slowly. "Is that how you've been so successful, by caring about people?" "That's how I survived when I wasn't successful," Sarah said. "Someone noticed that I cared about people even when I was barely holding it together. That changed my life. Now I'm trying to build organizations where that same quality, caring about people, treating them with dignity, recognizing their worth, is the baseline expectation rather than a rare exception." 5 years after Robert Chen walked into Mi's diner, Sarah was 37 years old and could hardly recognize her life. She was director of operations for a restaurant group that now included 12 locations. She made more money than she'd ever imagined was possible. She lived in a comfortable house with a daughter who was thriving, who never had to experience the kind of uncertainty and scarcity that had defined Sarah's earlier parenting years. But the external success, while meaningful, wasn't what defined her transformation. What had changed most fundamentally was her sense of self, her understanding of her own worth. She was no longer someone things happened to, someone at the mercy of circumstances and other people's decisions. She was someone who made things happen, who influenced outcomes, who had agency and authority, and the ability to impact other people's lives in profound ways. The little girl who'd grown up poor, the young woman who'd married too young and divorced broke, the struggling single mother who'd counted pennies and chosen which bills to pay late, that Sarah hadn't disappeared. She was still there, still informed every decision, still reminded Sarah where she came from and why her work mattered. But she'd been joined by this other Sarah, the one who led with confidence, who made difficult decisions, who looked at challenges as problems to solve rather than insurmountable obstacles. Emma was 11 now, on the cusp of adolescence, asking harder questions about the world and her place in it. One evening over dinner, she asked her mother something that stopped Sarah cold. "Mom, you know how you tell stories about when we were really poor, when you worked at the diner and we lived in that tiny apartment, and sometimes we ate pasta for like 5 days in a row?" Sarah nodded, wondering where this was going. "I don't really remember that. I mean, I remember some things, but not the hard parts. Was I unhappy? Sarah thought about how to answer honestly without burdening her daughter with memories she'd been too young to fully process. You were little, baby. You didn't understand that we were struggling. I worked really hard to make sure you felt safe and loved even when things were difficult. Did it work? Did I feel safe? Yes, Emma said immediately. I always felt safe with you. Even in that tiny apartment, even when I didn't get all the things other kids had, I always knew you loved me and you'd take care of me. Sarah felt her throat tighten. That's all I wanted. More than anything, I wanted you to feel secure even when I didn't. Emma was quiet for a moment. I'm glad we have more now. I like our house and I like that you're not always exhausted. But I want you to know that I would have been okay either way, because you were always there. You always made me feel like I was the most important thing in your life. You are, Sarah whispered. You always have been. Everything I did, every choice I made, it was all for you. I know, Emma said simply. That's what I mean. That's what made me feel safe. Later that night, Sarah reflected on what Emma had said. She'd spent so many years feeling inadequate, feeling like she wasn't providing enough, wasn't being enough. She'd carried guilt about the tiny apartment and the pasta dinners and the second-hand clothes, had worried constantly that she was failing her daughter by not being able to give her more. But Emma hadn't needed more. She'd needed love, attention, security, all things Sarah had provided even when she had nothing else to give. The material improvements in their lives were wonderful, were meaningful, made everything easier. But they weren't what had made Emma feel safe. Sarah's presence, her dedication, her unwavering commitment, that had been enough all along. It was a kind of revelation, a reframing of those difficult years. She hadn't failed Emma by being poor. She'd succeeded in the ways that actually mattered by being present, loving, determined to protect her daughter's childhood even while fighting adult battles. The shame she'd carried about their circumstances during those years, maybe it had been misplaced. Maybe she should have felt proud instead, proud of how hard she'd fought, how much she'd sacrificed, how she'd managed to make her daughter feel secure even when she felt anything but. Robert Chen invited Sarah to lunch one afternoon at one of his upscale locations, the flagship restaurant that had started his empire. It was the kind of place Sarah had once imagined only wealthy people experienced, all white tablecloths and wine glasses that caught the light, servers who moved with the practiced grace of dancers. I wanted to celebrate something with you, Robert said once they'd ordered. Do you know what today is? Sarah searched her memory but came up blank. I'm sorry, I don't. 5 years ago today, I walked into Me's diner. I'd had a terrible day, back-to-back meetings that went poorly, a deal falling through, everyone wanting something from me. I was exhausted and frustrated, and I just wanted a quiet meal somewhere no one knew me. I had no intention of changing anyone's life that night. He smiled at the memory. But then I watched you work. I watched how you treated every customer the same, with genuine kindness, with attention, with care. I saw you slip that elderly couple extra pie. I saw you clean up after those kids without complaint. I saw you smile at everyone even though I could tell you were exhausted. And I thought about my mother, about how she would have loved you, about how she always told me that the measure of a person was how they treated others when they had nothing to gain from it. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I had no idea anyone was watching. That's exactly why it mattered. You weren't performing kindness for an audience. You were just being who you are, someone who cares about doing good work, treating people well, maintaining dignity even in difficult circumstances. That's not something you can teach or train. That's character. He raised his wine glass. 5 years ago, I took a chance on you. But honestly, it wasn't much of a chance. I saw who you were and I knew you'd succeed. What I didn't anticipate was how much you'd exceed even my high expectations. You haven't just run restaurants successfully. You've transformed how we think about talent development, about leadership, about building organizations. You've changed lives, Sarah. Dozens of them directly, hundreds of them indirectly. Sarah clinked her glass against his. You changed mine first. I'll never forget that, never. They talked for hours about the business, about future plans, about the leadership program and how it might expand into other industries. But mostly they talked about people, the Jennifers and Carloses and Miguels, the individuals whose lives had been altered because someone had seen their potential and invested in it. As Sarah drove home that evening, she thought about how random it all seemed, how one night, one customer, one decision to notice her could cascade into everything that followed. What if Robert had chosen a different diner? What if he'd been too tired to pay attention to his server? What if she'd been having an off night, had been too depleted to show the kindness that caught his attention? But then she reconsidered. Maybe it wasn't random at all. She'd been showing up and doing her best for 5 years before that night, treating people well even when no one noticed, maintaining her integrity even when it didn't seem to matter. Robert had happened to see it on that particular evening, but she'd been living that way all along. The opportunity had been random, but being ready for it, being the kind of person who deserved it, that had been built over years of choices, day after day of deciding who she wanted to be even when circumstances made it hard. That realization felt important. You couldn't control when opportunities would come, couldn't force doors to open, but you could control who you were when doors did open, could make sure that when someone finally looked closely, they'd see something worth investing in. Sarah had been ready not because she was lucky, but because she'd spent years becoming someone worth believing in. Haven was thriving, becoming exactly what Sarah had envisioned, a neighborhood gathering place, somewhere families celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where solo diners felt comfortable eating at the bar, where regular customers became something like family. Miguel had blossomed in his role, his confidence growing as he realized he was genuinely good at this, that his years of experience and his natural instincts for flavor and timing were every bit as valuable as formal training. One busy Saturday evening, Sarah was at Haven helping cover a server shortage when she noticed a young woman sitting alone in a corner booth, studying the menu with the same careful calculation Sarah had seen in so many faces, the math of someone counting dollars, weighing hunger against budget. The woman was wearing scrubs, nurse or medical assistant, Sarah guessed, and looked exhausted in the specific way that came from caring for others all day with nothing left for yourself. Sarah approached her table. "Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm one of the managers here. Have you been here before?" The woman shook her head. "First time. I've heard good things, but I'm just—" She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "I'm trying to decide if I can afford to eat here or if I should just go home." Sarah felt a deep recognition, a kinship that transcended the differences in their current circumstances. "Let me tell you a secret. Our chef makes this amazing meatloaf. It's not on the menu, but it's what the staff eats. Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans, and honestly, it's the most comforting thing you can imagine after a long day. Would you be willing to try it?" The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "How much?" "On the house. You look like you've had the kind of day where you deserve something good. No strings, no expectations. Just a meal and maybe some peace and quiet." Tears welled in the woman's eyes. "I'm a home health aide. I spent today taking care of an elderly man who has no family, who's dying alone. It was really hard. I just wanted to eat somewhere other than my apartment, wanted to feel normal for an hour. But I wasn't sure I could afford it." Sarah sat down across from her. "What's your name?" "Linda." "Linda, you spend your days caring for others. Let someone care for you today. And not just today. If you come back, ask for me. We'll make sure you always have a table and a good meal. People like you, who do work that matters even though it doesn't pay what it should, you deserve to be taken care of too." They talked for a few minutes, Linda opening up about her work, her struggles, her dreams of eventually becoming a nurse if she could figure out how to afford the schooling. Sarah listened, made mental notes, saw echoes of her own story in Linda's determination and quiet exhaustion. When Linda left 2 hours later, full and rested and somehow renewed, she hugged Sarah fiercely. "Thank you. This meant more than you know." After she was gone, Miguel came out of the kitchen. You gave away another meal. Sarah smiled. I did, and I'd do it again. You know people talk about this place, right? About how it's different. About how you actually care whether people are struggling. Word is spreading. This isn't just a restaurant, it's something else. Something better. Sarah looked around the dining room, full of people eating and laughing and connecting. Good. That's exactly what I want. This room, these tables, they should be places where people feel valued, seen, cared for, where someone working 3 jobs can afford to bring their kid for a birthday dinner, where an exhausted healthcare worker can find a moment of peace, where being broke doesn't mean being excluded from community spaces. That's not how most restaurants think. Most restaurants didn't hire me, Sarah said. Robert did because he saw something different. Now I'm trying to build places that reflect what I believe, that everyone deserves dignity, that service isn't servitude, that businesses can be profitable while also being humane. If we succeed, great. If we don't, at least we tried to do something meaningful. But they were succeeding. All the locations were profitable. The leadership program was generating industry attention and interest. Staff retention was remarkably high in an industry known for turnover. They were proving that Sarah's model, invest in people, treat everyone with respect, create environments where both staff and customers feel valued, wasn't just idealistic. It was practical, sustainable, replicable. Emma turned 12 and they threw a party at their house. A real party with a dozen friends, decorations, a cake from a bakery, presents that weren't carefully budgeted. Sarah watched her daughter laugh with her friends, so confident and secure, and felt grateful beyond measure. Not just for the material comfort, but for the fact that Emma was growing up believing that the world could be kind, that hard work mattered, that treating people well was both the right thing to do and the smart thing to do. One of Emma's friends approached Sarah during the party. Mrs. Mitchell, Emma told us about how you used to work at a diner and then someone gave you a big opportunity. That's really cool. Sarah smiled. It changed my life. Someone believed in me when I didn't totally believe in myself. Emma says you do that for other people now. Give them opportunities like someone gave you. I try. I don't always get it right, but I try. The girl looked thoughtful. My mom works 2 jobs. She's always tired, like how Emma says you used to be. But she's really smart and really good at what she does. I wish someone would notice her like that person noticed you. Sarah's heart ached. What does your mom do? She's a manager at a grocery store, and she cleans offices at night. She says the grocery store job is okay, but she wishes she could do something more, except she doesn't have time to go back to school or anything. Sarah pulled out a business card, wrote a note on the back. Give this to your mom. Tell her to call me. I can't promise anything, but I'd like to talk to her about our leadership program. If she's interested in restaurant management, we provide training and work with people's schedules. She wouldn't have to quit her current jobs until she'd completed the program and had a new position lined up. The girl stared at the card. Really? You just talked to her because I told you she works hard. Hard work matters. Character matters. If she's doing 2 jobs and still showing up for you as a mom, still managing to be good at what she does despite being exhausted, that tells me a lot about who she is. The rest, we can teach. Later, Emma asked her about the interaction. Mom, are you going to hire my friend's mom? I'm going to talk to her, see if it's a good fit. But yes, if she's interested and I think she has the potential, I'll give her the same kind of chance someone gave me. You do that a lot, don't you? Help people. I try, because I remember what it felt like to need help, to feel stuck, to wonder if this was all my life was going to be. Someone saw past my circumstances and recognized my potential. Now it's my responsibility to do the same for others. Emma hugged her tight. I want to be like that when I grow up. I want to help people too. You already do, sweetheart. Every day. The kindness you show, the way you include kids who are sitting alone, the way you stand up for your friends, that matters just as much as anything I do in my job. The years continued to unfold in a pattern of work and growth, challenges and triumphs. Sarah opened more restaurants, refined the leadership program, became a recognized voice in discussions about talent development and ethical business practices. She was invited to serve on boards, to consult with companies trying to improve their organizational culture, to speak at business schools about leadership models that prioritize people over pure profit. But the work she found most meaningful remained the individual connections, the one-on-one moments where she could look someone in the eye and say, "I see you. You have value. Your circumstances don't define your potential. Let me help you prove that to yourself." Jennifer, the waitress from Mies who Sarah had recruited years ago, was now running 3 restaurant locations and being groomed for an executive role. She'd earned her business degree through the company's education assistance program, had proven herself a talented manager and a natural leader. They had lunch occasionally, 2 single mothers who'd both fought their way up from difficult circumstances, who understood each other in ways that didn't require explanation. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," Jennifer said during one of these lunches. "5 years ago, I was one bad month away from homelessness. Now I'm managing restaurants, making decisions that affect dozens of people, earning enough that my kids can have things I never dreamed I could provide. How did this happen?" "You made it happen," Sarah said. "I opened a door, but you walked through it and did the work. You earned everything you have." "But if you hadn't given me the chance—" "Someone gave me a chance," Sarah interrupted gently. "Now we're both giving chances to others. That's how it works. We lift each other up. We see potential in people who can't see it in themselves yet. We remember what it felt like to be struggling, and we help others through their struggles." She smiled. "You know what the best part is? It's not just that we succeeded. It's that we're proving that this model works, that businesses can be profitable while also being humane, that investing in people based on character rather than credentials creates better organizations. We're changing minds about what's possible." 10 years after that transformative night at Mies Diner, Sarah was 42 years old. Horizon Dining Group had 23 locations across 4 states. The leadership program had trained over 200 people, with a retention rate of 85%, almost unheard of in an industry where turnover was typically epidemic. Dozens of those graduates had gone on to management positions. Several had opened their own restaurants. All of them carried forward the philosophy that had shaped their training: people first, always. Sarah had written the book that publishers kept requesting, not a business book exactly, but a memoir with business lessons woven through it. She titled it Under the Plate, and it told her story honestly: the struggles, the shame, the exhaustion of being a single mother barely surviving, and then the night that changed everything. But more than that, it told the stories of everyone who'd come after her: Jennifer and Carlos and Miguel and Linda, and dozens of others whose lives had been altered because someone had seen their potential and invested in it. The book became a surprise bestseller, resonating with people far beyond the restaurant industry. Readers wrote to her about how it had inspired them to look differently at the people serving them, to recognize that everyone had a story, that circumstances didn't define capability. Managers wrote about how it had changed their hiring practices, their leadership style, their entire approach to building teams. But the letter that meant the most came from an unexpected source. It was handwritten, postmarked from a small town in Nebraska, written by a woman named Dorothy Chen. "Dear Ms. Mitchell," the letter began, "you don't know me, but I was married to Robert Chen's uncle. I was close with Robert's mother, Emily, and I wanted you to know something she once told me. Emily used to say that she hoped her restaurant would outlive her, but more than that, she hoped the values she lived by would outlive her. She wanted kindness and hard work and treating people with dignity to matter more than profit or prestige. When she died, I worried that those values died with her, that everything would become just about business and money. But then Robert told me about you, about what you're building, about how you're carrying forward exactly what Emily believed in. I read your book and I cried, because you're exactly who Emily hoped would exist in the world. Someone who understands that how we treat people when no one is watching defines who we really are. Emily would have loved you. She would have been so proud of what you're building. Thank you for honoring her memory in ways she never could have imagined. Thank you for proving that her values weren't naive or impractical, that they were actually the foundation for building something lasting and meaningful. Sarah kept that letter in her desk drawer, took it out and reread it whenever she was having a hard day, whenever she questioned whether what she was doing mattered. She'd never met Emily Chen, would never be able to thank her for the son she'd raised, for the values she'd instilled. But through Robert, through Sarah, through everyone they'd both helped, Emily's legacy lived on. Emma was 16 now, thinking about colleges, dreaming about her future. She wanted to study social work, wanted to help people the way she'd watched her mother help people. "You inspired me," she told Sarah one evening. "I watched you build all this, not just for yourself but for other people. I want to do that too, in my own way." Sarah felt pride swell in her chest. "You can do anything you want, baby. And whatever you choose, you'll be amazing at it because you have something that can't be taught. You genuinely care about people." "I learned that from you." "No," Sarah said. "You were born with it. I just tried not to mess it up." They laughed together, this mother and daughter who'd survived so much, who'd grown together through hardship into security, who understood that their bond had been forged in difficult times and strengthened by better ones. Sarah continued working, continued building, continued looking for the people society overlooked, the ones grinding through invisible struggles with quiet dignity. She hired single parents and immigrants, people with gaps in their resumes and unconventional backgrounds, people who needed a chance more than they needed another lecture about bootstrap pulling. And the model kept working. The restaurants kept succeeding. The staff stayed, built careers, recommended friends and family, created a culture where good work was recognized, and everyone was treated with respect. Customers returned again and again, not just for the food but for the atmosphere, for the feeling of being welcomed and valued, for the sense that eating at these restaurants meant supporting something bigger than just a business transaction. On the 10th anniversary of Ember and Oak's opening, they threw a massive celebration. Staff from all the locations came, along with program graduates, vendors, regular customers, community leaders. Me was there, finally fully retired, beaming with pride. Miguel stood with his wife and 3 sons, all of them watching him with obvious admiration. Jennifer brought her kids, now teenagers, who'd grown up watching their mother transform from struggling waitress to successful executive. And Robert Chen gave a toast that brought the room to tears. "10 years ago," he said, "I walked into a diner and saw something special. I saw a woman who was struggling but hadn't given up, who was exhausted but still kind, who treated everyone with dignity even though her own circumstances would have justified bitterness. I made her an offer that changed her life. But what I didn't fully appreciate then was how much she would change mine and all of ours." He gestured around the room. "Every person here is connected to Sarah in some way. She's hired you, trained you, mentored you, inspired you. She's built an organization that proves every single day that kindness isn't weakness, that investing in people is smart business, that treating everyone with respect creates something sustainable and valuable." His voice thickened with emotion. "My mother spent her whole life believing these things, living these values. She died wondering if anyone would remember what she stood for, if it would all just disappear into the profit-driven culture of modern business. Sarah, you've answered that question. You've proven that my mother was right, that her values weren't impractical idealism, but the foundation for building something that matters." The room erupted in applause. Sarah stood there, overwhelmed, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The struggles, the shame, the exhaustion, the note under a plate, the terrifying leap of accepting an opportunity she wasn't sure she deserved, the years of work, of learning, of building, the people she'd helped along the way who'd helped her in return. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real. It was earned. It was the result of character meeting opportunity, of hard work meeting belief, of potential meeting investment. It was proof that life could change, that circumstances weren't permanent, that being seen, truly seen, could be transformative. When the applause died down, Sarah stepped forward to speak. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. 10 years ago, I was clearing a table at Me's diner. I was exhausted, broke, scared about the future. A customer had just left me a $0 tip, and I was standing there feeling invisible, feeling like no matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough. Then I found a note that told me I'd been seen, that my character mattered, that someone believed I was capable of more than I believed about myself. She paused, looking around the room at all the faces, some she'd known for years, some who were newer to the organization, all of them connected by this shared philosophy, this belief that people mattered more than profit margins. That note changed my life, but not because of the money that came with it or even because of the job offer. It changed my life because someone looked at me and saw worth, saw potential, saw something valuable that I couldn't see in myself anymore. Robert didn't save me. He gave me the opportunity to save myself. He believed in me enough that I started believing in me too. Her eyes found Emma in the crowd, now a young woman who stood tall and confident, so different from the scared little girl who'd asked why they couldn't have new shoes. Everything I've built since then has been about paying that forward, about looking for people who are struggling but haven't given up, who are kind even when they're exhausted, who show up and do their best even when no one seems to notice. Because those are the people who deserve opportunities. Not because they're pitiful, not out of charity, but because they already possess the qualities that actually matter. Character, integrity, work ethic, empathy, everything else can be taught. She turned to Robert. You taught me that businesses can be profitable and humane, that success doesn't require sacrificing values, that investing in people isn't soft or naive, it's the smartest thing a leader can do. Your mother knew that, you know that, and now hundreds of people in this room know it too, and they're spreading that knowledge everywhere they go. Sarah's voice grew stronger. To everyone here who's graduated from our leadership program, who's worked in our kitchens and dining rooms, who's been part of building this, you are the proof. You're proof that potential exists in unexpected places, that talent and capability aren't limited to people with impressive credentials, that given a real chance, people will rise to meet it. She smiled through the tears that were now flowing freely. I was a waitress who found a note under a plate. Now I'm standing here, surrounded by people who believed in me and people I've believed in, and I'm telling you, this is real. Change is possible. Doors open. And when they do, walk through them. Then hold them open for the people coming behind you. The party continued late into the night. Sarah moved through the crowd, hugging people, listening to stories, watching the connections forming and reforming, former colleagues catching up, mentors checking in with mentees, friendships that had formed across hierarchical lines because the culture encouraged treating everyone as equally valuable. At one point, she found herself standing with a small group of women, all of them single mothers, all of them now in management positions, all of them carrying stories of struggle that had led to this moment of celebration. You know what's crazy, Jennifer said. 5 years ago, if you told me I'd be running multiple restaurants, making six figures, sending my kids to college, I would have thought you were delusional. I couldn't imagine a path from where I was to anything like this. That's what makes Sarah different, said Maria, who'd been hired as a hostess 3 years ago and was now an assistant manager. She doesn't just see where you are, she sees where you could be. She invests in the could be. Linda, the home health aide Sarah had met at Haven years ago and who now managed that location, nodded. I was eating a free meal because I couldn't afford to pay for it. Sarah didn't treat me like a charity case. She treated me like someone who mattered, who was valuable. That changed how I saw myself. When she offered me the chance to join the program, I took it because she made me believe I was capable of more. Sarah listened to them talk, feeling the weight and wonder of what they'd all built together. It hadn't been just her. It had been each of them, taking chances on themselves, doing the hard work, supporting each other through struggles. She'd opened doors, but they'd walked through them and then propped them open for others. Later, as the party was winding down, Robert found her standing alone on the restaurant's outdoor patio, looking up at the stars. "Quite a night," he said, joining her. "Quite a decade," Sarah replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life." I always could." He was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, I want to talk to you about something. I'm thinking about stepping back from the day-to-day operations. I'm not retiring exactly, but I'm ready to let someone else lead the company forward. I'd like that someone to be you." Sarah turned to stare at him. "You want me to run Horizon Dining Group, the entire company?" "You've been essentially doing it already for the past 2 years. You just haven't had the title or the full authority. But you're the one with the vision, with the values that should guide our future. You're the one everyone looks to for leadership. It should be official." "Robert, she struggled for words. 10 years ago, I was a waitress." 10 years ago, you were a leader who happened to be working as a waitress because no one had given you the opportunity to be anything else. Now you've proven what you always were. Say yes, Sarah. Take the company forward. Build on what we've started. Make it even better." She thought about it. The responsibility, the challenge, the opportunity to scale what they'd built to reach more people, to prove on an even larger stage that businesses could prioritize both profit and people. It was terrifying. It was exciting. It was exactly the kind of door she'd learned to walk through. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll do it." The transition happened over the next 6 months. Robert remained as chairman of the board, but Sarah became CEO, the public face and operational leader of a company that now employed over 2,000 people across 5 states. She was featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences and universities, recognized as a leader who was changing how companies thought about talent development and organizational culture. But the attention and accolades weren't what drove her. What drove her was the steady stream of people whose lives were changing because of the opportunities they were creating. The single mother who went from retail worker to restaurant manager. The refugee who started as a dishwasher and became a sous chef. The veteran struggling with PTSD who found purpose and community in their kitchens. The formerly incarcerated person who'd been rejected everywhere else but was given a chance to prove themselves here. Each story was unique, but they all shared common threads: people who'd been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed as lacking potential because of their circumstances. People who, given a real chance and genuine support, had proven themselves capable of far more than anyone had imagined. Sarah established new programs, expanded old ones. They created partnerships with community colleges and trade schools, offering scholarships and internships. They built relationships with organizations serving homeless populations, offering job training and placement for people trying to rebuild their lives. They implemented second chance hearing policies, recognizing that past mistakes shouldn't permanently disqualify someone from future opportunities. And through it all, Sarah remained grounded in her own story, in the memory of what it felt like to be exhausted and invisible, working hard with no guarantee it would ever lead anywhere. She kept the original note, now carefully preserved and framed, in her office, a daily reminder of the moment everything changed. Emma graduated from high school at the top of her class, accepted into multiple universities with scholarship offers from all of them. She chose a school with a strong social work program, determined to build a career helping people navigate systems and access resources. "I want to do what you do," she told Sarah. "Just in a different field. I want to see potential in people and help them realize it." Sarah hugged her daughter tight, this young woman she'd raised through struggle and success, who'd witnessed both and had somehow emerged with values intact and strengthened. You're going to be amazing. You already are. On the night before Emma left for college, they sat together in the living room of the house that no longer felt like a miracle, but like home. Earned, deserved, the physical manifestation of years of work and growth. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Emma said. "Always. Do you ever wish things had been different? That you hadn't had to struggle so much, that we hadn't been so poor when I was little?" Sarah thought about the question carefully. "I wish it had been easier for you. I wish I could have given you more sooner, but for me, the struggle made me who I am. It taught me empathy, resilience, what actually matters. If I'd had an easy path, I might have become someone completely different. Someone who didn't understand what it feels like to be overlooked, who couldn't recognize potential in unexpected places, who took success for granted rather than understanding it as something precious and hard-won." She took Emma's hand. "My difficult circumstances led to me being in that diner on the night Robert walked in. My years of experience serving tables meant I had the skills he was looking for. My struggles made me someone who could appreciate the opportunity he offered, who was hungry enough and determined enough to make the most of it. Would I have preferred an easier path? Maybe. But I'm grateful for the path I had, because it led me here to this life, to being able to help other people the way I was helped." Emma nodded slowly. "I get that. I think watching you struggle and fight and never give up taught me more than having everything handed to me would have. You showed me what strength looks like, what real courage is, the kind that shows up every day even when things are hard. You inherited that strength, baby. You have your own courage, and I can't wait to see what you do with it." Years continued to pass in the way years do, marked by milestones and ordinary moments, challenges overcome and new ones emerging, growth that felt both gradual and startling when you looked back to see how far you'd come. Sarah turned 50. Horizon Dining Group had 40 locations across 8 states. The leadership program had trained over 1,000 people. Emma had graduated with her MSW and was working for a nonprofit that helped women escape domestic violence, applying everything she'd learned from watching her mother build people up and create opportunities. Sarah met someone, a widower named David who owned a bookstore, who'd raised 2 kids on his own after his wife died, who understood single parenthood and resilience and the particular exhaustion of doing everything alone. They married quietly, both of them past the age of fairy tale romance, but finding something deeper, steadier, built on mutual respect and shared values. Me died peacefully at 83, and Sarah spoke at her funeral about the older woman who'd given her a job when she desperately needed one, who'd been kind when kindness was in short supply, who believed in her enough to encourage her to take the chance Robert offered. The diner building had been converted into a community center, and Sarah had made sure it bore a plaque, "Me's Place, where everyone matters." Miguel retired as executive chef, and Sarah threw him a party that rivaled the 10th anniversary celebration. His 3 sons had all gone to college, the first in their family to do so, and Miguel had become a grandfather twice over. He'd lived the American dream not in the mythical bootstrap-pulling way, but in the real way: hard work recognized, potential invested in, talent given room to flourish. Robert Chen passed away at 79, and Sarah delivered the eulogy, her voice breaking as she told the assembled crowd about the night a billionaire had walked into a diner and changed her life. She talked about his mother Emily, about the values he'd inherited and lived, about his commitment to proving that businesses could be both profitable and humane. "He didn't just build restaurants," Sarah said. "He built opportunities. He built futures. He looked at people and saw not who they appeared to be, but who they could become. He invested in potential, believed in character, proved that the qualities that make someone a good person are the same qualities that make them a good employee, a good manager, a good leader." She looked out at the crowd, hundreds of people whose lives Robert had touched directly or indirectly. "His legacy isn't just the company he built. It's all of us, Every person in this room who was given a chance, who was seen and valued, who was invested in and believed in. We are his legacy. And the way we honor him is by continuing what he started, by seeing potential in unexpected places, by investing in people based on character rather than credentials, by building organizations that value humanity as much as profitability. After the funeral, Robert's children approached Sarah. They wanted her to continue leading the company, to carry forward their father's vision. She agreed, but with one condition, that they would establish the Emily and Robert Chen Foundation, dedicated to creating opportunities for people in service industries, funding education and training programs, supporting organizations that help people escape poverty. The foundation launched with a substantial endowment and a mission statement Sarah wrote personally. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone's potential matters. Circumstances don't define capability. Given a real chance and genuine support, people will rise to meet it. Sarah was in her late 50s when she started thinking seriously about succession planning. Not because she was ready to retire, but because she believed in creating pathways for the next generation of leaders. She looked around the organization at the people who'd come up through the ranks, who'd been given chances and had seized them, who now embodied the values and philosophy that had defined Horizon Dining Group's success. Jennifer was the obvious choice. She'd been with the company for over 15 years, had proven herself again and again, had mentored dozens of other managers, had never forgotten where she came from or what it felt like to struggle. Sarah promoted her to president and COO, began training her to eventually take over as CEO. "I don't know if I'm ready," Jennifer said when Sarah told her. "You're ready," Sarah assured her. "And you know how I know? Because that's exactly what I said 15 years ago when Robert offered me my first management position. Being unsure, being humble enough to question whether you're ready, that's a sign you'll be a good leader. The people who are absolutely certain they're ready are usually the ones who aren't." On Sarah's 60th birthday, the company threw a celebration that felt more like a family reunion than a corporate event. People came from across the country, former employees who'd moved on to open their own restaurants, current staff from all 40-plus locations, program graduates who'd built careers in hospitality and beyond. There were speeches and toasts, stories and laughter, tears and gratitude. Emma came with her husband and Sarah's 2 grandchildren, aged 4 and 6. Watching them run around the restaurant, this space that represented so much of her life's work, Sarah felt a deep sense of completion. Not finished, not done, but complete. She'd taken the opportunity she'd been given and multiplied it 1,000 times over. She'd proven that character mattered, that investing in people worked, that businesses could be both successful and ethical. But more than any of that, she'd proven to herself that she was exactly what Robert had seen in her that night. Someone with integrity, with heart, with the kind of strength that showed up quietly, every day, in how you treated people when no one important seemed to be watching. Late in the evening, after most guests had left, Sarah found herself back in that corner booth at Ember and Oak, the same booth where Robert had sat 20 years ago. She pulled out her phone and looked at a photo she'd saved. The original note, the one that had started everything, its words still as powerful as the night she'd first read them. Her phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Just wanted to say thank you for tonight. 20 years since you gave me that first free meal when I was broke and exhausted. Look at where we are now. Look at what we've all built together. I'm crying happy tears." Sarah smiled and typed back, "We saved each other. That's what this has always been about. We lift each other up." She thought about that phrase, "we lift each other up." It had become something of an unofficial motto for the company, the foundation, the entire philosophy they'd built. Not bootstrap pulling, not rugged individualism, not the myth that success was purely individual achievement, but rather the recognition that we all need help sometimes, that giving that help was both generous and strategic, that building other people up ultimately lifted everyone. The note had promised her $85,000 a year, benefits, a chance to prove herself. She'd received all of that and so much more. A career that mattered, work that felt meaningful, the opportunity to impact thousands of lives. She'd gone from being invisible to being seen, from being dismissed to being sought after for her expertise, from barely surviving to thriving in ways she'd never imagined possible. But the real gift hadn't been the salary or the position or even the security. The real gift had been belief, someone believing in her before she fully believed in herself, someone seeing her worth when she'd started to doubt she had any, someone investing in her potential when she wasn't sure she had any left. That belief had been transformative. It had given her permission to try, courage to risk, confidence to persist when things got hard. And now she'd spent 2 decades giving that same gift to others, the gift of being seen, of being believed in, of being invested in based not on what you'd achieved, but on who you were and who you could become. Sarah stood up from the booth, ran her hand along the table one more time, and walked through the restaurant, turning off lights. The space glowed in the darkness, beautiful and welcoming, a physical manifestation of values she'd fought to maintain: dignity, kindness, opportunity, belief in human potential. As she locked the door and walked to her car, Sarah thought about the young woman she'd been 20 years ago, exhausted, scared, fighting so hard just to keep her head above water. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that it would all work out, that a door would open, that being seen would change everything. But then she reconsidered. That woman had needed to struggle, needed to fight, needed to develop the strength and empathy and resilience that would eventually make her someone worth investing in. The struggle had been necessary, not because struggle was inherently good, but because it had forged her into someone who could recognize struggle in others, who could see past circumstances to character, who understood that potential existed everywhere, just waiting for someone to notice it and nurture it. She drove home through familiar streets, past places that marked her journey, the small apartment where she and Emma had lived in those early years, Me's old diner, now the community center, the park where she'd processed Robert's offer, trying to decide if she had the courage to try. All of it part of the story, all of it necessary, all of it leading to this moment of quiet satisfaction. At home, David was reading in bed, looked up when she came in. "Good night." "The best," Sarah said, "just thinking about how far we've all come." "You mean how far you've brought everyone," he corrected gently. Sarah shook her head. "It was never just me. It was Robert seeing something in me. It was me giving me a job. It was Miguel covering for me when I was falling apart. It was Patricia mentoring me. It was every person who took a chance I offered them and proved they deserved it. We did this together." She got ready for bed, thinking about tomorrow's meetings, about the new initiatives they were planning, about the next cohort of leadership program participants who'd be starting soon. There was always more work to do, more people to help, more potential to recognize and invest in. But tonight, she let herself rest in gratitude. Gratitude for the struggle that had shaped her. Gratitude for the note under a plate that had changed everything. Gratitude for the 2 decades of opportunities to pay forward what she'd been given. Gratitude for a life that had transformed from barely surviving to actively thriving, from feeling invisible to being truly seen. In the darkness, Sarah smiled. Somewhere out there, other people were clearing tables, counting pennies, wondering if this was all life would ever be. She couldn't help everyone. She couldn't change the entire system. But she could keep doing what she'd been doing, looking for potential in unexpected places, believing in people before they fully believed in themselves, creating opportunities for those who'd been overlooked and underestimated. One note had changed her life. How many lives could she change by multiplying that gesture, that belief, that investment in human potential? She'd spent 20 years finding out, and she wasn't done yet. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new people to meet, new opportunities to create. But tonight she rested in the knowledge that she'd taken the gift she'd been given and had honored it in the best way possible, by giving it away again and again to everyone who needed exactly what Robert had given her. The life-changing power of being seen.